time. I would now like to turn the meeting over to ACCV Chair, Ms. Beth Luthi. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you to everyone who's attending. I wanted to just make a mention of the commissioners who are on the call at this time. There is me, Beth Luthi, Alexandra Stewart, Kathleen Gaffney, Cody Meisner, Martha Toomey, and John Howie. And I would just remind all of the commissioners and ex officio members that when you're speaking, if you don't mind starting with your name, that would be great. I think we'll have a good meeting. I know the process work group has been working very, very hard, and we're looking forward to their report for today. We would like to start with a public comment on the agenda items, and I would remind the public as they're commenting that this part of the agenda is just public comment on the agenda. Amanda, are you able to see if we have any public comments on the agenda at this time?
Sure. If you do have a comment, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name slowly and clearly when prompted. Again, *1 if you have a comment. One moment for our first comment. Our first comment comes from Teresa Rangham. Your line is open.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. My name is Teresa Rangham. I'm the Executive Director for the National Vaccine Information Center. Our mission is dedicated to the prevention of vaccine injuries and deaths through public education and protecting the informed consent ethic and vaccine policies and laws. My comment with regard to the agenda would be first to the minutes. I provided public comment previously in the set of minutes that are due for passage. With regard to our previous inclusion in work groups and stakeholder engagements and the lack of inclusion today, the minutes don't reflect that we offered during the meeting to be a part of ACCV work groups where ACCV feels that would be of benefit, and in other stakeholder engagements that this committee may oversee or conduct. With regard to the VIS and presentations on the VIS, I would say, more of the same. We were there when we helped craft the language in the law, and I know that the ACCV was interested in presenting on the history on that. We certainly would be interested in providing a consumer perspective. And then there's just a small spelling error in one of the mentions of my name. My name is spelled wrong, if that could be corrected. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. At this time, we have no further comments.
Thank you, Teresa. Annie, if I can just run this past you really quick. So on approval of the September 2018 minutes, what happens to be the next item on our agenda, can we still have a vote with the note that there would be the inclusion of Teresa and the NVIC willing to be part of the ACCV work group, and also her commentary on the VIS statements from that meeting, and then the spelling error. Do we need to have those changed and sent back out to everyone, or can we do an approval with the understanding that those things would be put in?
Hi, Beth, it's Annie. We'd have to listen to the recording of the meeting to see what was actually said and then modify the minutes, and then they could be approved at the March meeting.
At the March meeting. All right, thank you.
And also,
We have Tina on the line. Tina, do you have an open line? Okay, operator?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you see if we have Tina Tan in the listen only?
Sure. One moment. I do have a speaker in right now. One moment, please.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I also, Beth received an email from Dino, and he's unable to join today.
That was Dino, you said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Tina, your line is open.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, Tina.
Thank you.
All right, so we're circling back to item 3 on the agenda, approval of the September 2018 minutes. So what I'm hearing is that we need to table approval of the minutes at this time, and then what we'll do is we'll approve the minutes for September and then this meeting in the March meeting. All right, hearing no objections, that's what we'll go with. Our first presentation today is from a report on the Division of Injury Compensation Programs. Dr. Nair, are you ready?
I am. Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good morning, Dr. Nair.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm happy to give an update. So just for some meeting highlights for today's meeting, you'll receive my update on HRSA's VICP activities. That'll be followed by an update from the Department of Justice Vaccine Litigation Office. And then you'll receive the updates from the ACCV ex officio members, including FDA, CDC, NIH, and the National Vaccine Program Office. And then you'll receive the update from the ACCV work group. So to start my update, I wanted to provide you with the number of petitions filed as of November 30th, 2018. These are basically go by the fiscal year. The federal fiscal year starts October 1st and it concludes September 30th. And the average annual number of petitions filed from the period fiscal year 2009 to 2013 was 427. In fiscal year 2014, you can see that increased to 633. Last fiscal year, 2018, our total number of claims filed had increased to 1,238. This fiscal year, again, we're only 2 months into this fiscal year, 2019, we have 203 petitions that have been filed. And this slide just graphically illustrates the numbers that I've shown previously. You can see this dramatic upswing in the number of claims that's been occurring. And we did have some leveling off between fiscal year 2017 and 2018. I now wanted to review the 5-year trend in number of claims that have been filed versus our administrative funding. This is only the funding that is for HRSA's administrative expenses. And you can see in fiscal year 2014, again, as I mentioned, we had 633 claims filed. Our administrative funding was $6.46 million. In 2015, we had 803 claims. That was a 27% jump over the previous number of claims that were filed. Our funding did increase to $7.5 million. That was a 16% increase in funding. In 2016, the number of claims filed was 1,120. That was nearly a 40% jump in the number of claims filed from that previous year. Our administrative funding stayed stable at $7.5 million from the previous year. 2017, we had 1,243 claims filed. That was an 11% increase. Our funding did increase to $7.75 million, which was a 3% increase. In 2018, we received 1,238 claims that were filed. This was roughly stable, a slight decrease in the number of claims filed from the previous year. Our administrative funding was increased 19% to $9.2 million. This fiscal year, our funding is stable, and the number of claims filed is 203. And that's as of December 3rd. Because of this increase in the number of claims that have been filed over recent years, we do have a number of claims that are awaiting review. These numbers are up to date as of December 3rd, and we have a total of 694 claims that have been filed with medical records that are awaiting review by HRSA medical staff. And of those, it's comprised of 547 claims that were filed in fiscal year 2018 and 147 filed in 2019. We basically have assigned all the claims filed in 2017 for review. And this slide covers the award amounts paid. This is as of November 30th, 2018. I won't go through every single number, but I'll highlight for fiscal year 2018, petitioners' awards were nearly $200 million, and attorney's fees and costs was nearly $27 million. This fiscal year, for 2019, petitioners' awards is $41 million, and attorney's fees and costs is $4.8 million. I was going to review the number of adjudications. For fiscal year 2018, there were 530 claims that were found compensable. 189 were dismissed for a total of 719. And this fiscal year, 41 have been found compensable, and 9 have been dismissed for a total of 50. This slide provides a little bit more detail about the adjudication categories for claims. The date range is a slightly different, so the numbers are somewhat off from the previous slide. But I'll just review the past couple of years' numbers. For fiscal year 2018, we had 531 claims that were compensable. Concessions were 183, or 34%. Court decisions were 63, 12%. And the majority of the claims that were compensable were through negotiated settlement, 54%. Not compensable for fiscal year 2018 was 189 claims, or the adjudication total was 720. For this fiscal year, again, we're 2 months into this fiscal year, a little over 2 months. 42 claims have been compensable, 17 through concession. We haven't had any court decisions, and settlement 25, or 60%. And not compensable is 14, for a total adjudication total of 56 for this fiscal year. And then the Vaccine Injury Compensation Trust Fund, I was going to give you an update on. The balance is $3.8 billion. Excise tax revenue is $304 million, and that includes money from prior year refunds, $4.7 million, interest on investments, $69 million, and the total income, $378 million. The interest as a percentage of total income is 18.32%. And this is from the U.S. Treasury Bureau of Fiscal Service. They post a detailed report for every month that's on their website for the Vaccine Injury Trust Fund. Other activities, I've mentioned before the implementation of the maternal immunization provisions. On April 4th, we issued the notice proposed rulemaking to add the category of vaccines recommended for pregnant women to the vaccine injury table. That was published in the Federal Registry. We had a comment period that ended October 1st and received 49 comments. We're reviewing those comments, and our responses to the comments will be included in the final rule that we're working on. And information on ACCV meetings can be found on the website, and you can find the presentation minutes on our website from previous meetings, and the link is here. And contact information for the public to participate in commission meetings, they can reach out to Annie at her email address and the phone number listed here. And lastly, if you want to learn more about HRSA, which is the agency which houses the Division of Injury Compensation Programs, you can visit the website. In addition to the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, there's a number of other programs that are housed in HRSA that affect Americans' health, including programs related to HIV care, organ transplantation, poison control, and community health centers. And you can find a lot of great information either on the HRSA website or through these social media outlets. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Nair. I just wanted to point out that adding pregnant women to the vaccine injury table actually came out of a work group for the ACCV, and it's good to see the progression of that recommendation moving forward. I did have a question, if you don't mind. This is Beth. So on slide number 7, are you able to go backwards to slide number 7? Thank you. So in fiscal year 2017, it was $252 million in the petitioner's award, and then it dropped by $53 million between 2017 and 2018. And I was just wondering,
slide 6? Which slide are we looking at?
7.
Okay. Okay.
The top of it is DICP update award amounts paid as of November 30th, 2018. And I'm in that middle column, the petitioner's award column. And I'm just wondering if you have any idea why there was a drop that year?
Yeah, the award amount is determined by the court, but I think what may be playing a role in this is I mentioned the backlog of claims, so it may be that with fewer claims being reviewed from HRSA, that may result in a delay in petitioners receiving their compensation. And we've discussed previously the increase in the number of claims filed has affected all aspects of the program, including DOJ and the court, and that may also be playing a role in the number of claims the court is able to adjudicate. So I think it's probably multifactorial.
Okay. Thank you. And then am I correct in assuming that the vast majority are still adults with SERVA injuries and the influenza vaccine?
Are you asking about the backlog in terms of?
The claims that are being filed.
Yeah, overall, in terms of the number of claims filed, that is the majority is people alleging injury due to the influenza vaccine and adults.
And are you aware, Dr. Nair, of any educational efforts? I mean, it seems like, a SERVA injury is an injury that is preventable. Are there any sorts of educational efforts that you know of that are trying to address the SERVA injuries specifically?
Yeah, we provided an update to the National Vaccine Advisory Committee on SERVA injuries. I believe this was last year, and also provided an update to the ACIP. And both those groups were public meetings. We're very interested in preventing SERVA injuries and educating the public. CDC, I know, has done a number of outreach and educational events, and I believe revised their web materials to sort of address and educate providers on this injury. And I believe a number of other professional organizations as well have emphasized the importance of the correct location of the immunization in terms of where to administrate it. The CDC campaign, I believe it's Know the Site, Get It Right, really emphasizes correct placement of the intramuscular injection to avoid SERVA injuries. So there are education and outreach activities that are undergoing that hopefully, we'll see a reduction in the number of claims due to this injury.
Yeah, the American Academy of Pediatrics also, Beth has tried to spread this word pretty widely. Now, most of the cases are adults and not children, but still it does happen in children, and so the AAP has been bringing this to people's attention as well.
Was that Cody?
Yes, this is Cody.
Okay. This is Martha, Dr. Nair. Good morning. I have a few questions about if we have the statistics on, let's just go to 2018. You have about 1,200 filed claims. How many of those were children, pediatric filing, and do we have statistics on that, like the exact numbers? How many children? What I'm trying to determine is how many children are awaiting, are waiting in line and their cases have not been addressed yet.
Yeah, so I don't have the breakdown. We can find that in terms of the number of claims that are filed. I do know that the backlog, the number of claims that are awaiting review, that is exclusively adults. We've been able to assign pediatric claims pretty much as soon as they're filed with medical records. They do get assigned for review. We've been able to keep up for the most part with the pediatric ones, and I'm only speaking about HRSA here. But the adult claims is where we've fallen behind, and that backlog, that number I shared with the backlog, is exclusively adults, and for the most part, adults alleging injury due to the flu vaccine.
But once it's filed and it's been assigned, pediatric cases are still awaiting. They still haven't been assigned. There's still a backlog. They're still waiting. What's the average from filing to a decision in the pediatric section? Do we know what that is? Is it a year? Is it 2 years?
Yeah, I don't have that information. Yeah, that's a great question, but I'm not aware of that.
Is there a way? Is there any way to discern that?
Yeah, I'm not sure because you know, I can only speak to the HRSA part, and then as you know, the adjudication then goes through DOJ and then the court. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Narayan, this is Cody, and let me just jump in here because I was going to congratulate you because, and maybe I misunderstood, but I thought there were, on one of your slides, there were 0 claims awaiting adjudication from 2017. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry for the confusion. There's 0 claims that are awaiting review by HRSA from 2017. But, you know, that's the initial step of the process is the review by our medical team here at HRSA, and the adjudication is where sort of the court decides on an entitlement.
But it seems to me that's a great accomplishment on your part. I mean, that's you can't do much better than that, can you?
Well, we've made some progress in the number. I mean, we are reviewing essentially, you know, double our medical officers. Our staffing has remained stable in terms of the number of people reviewing claims, and you know, their workload has increased. But you know, we hate to see that backlog. It has resulted in delays to petitioners. There's no question of that. So we're not very pleased about the backlog, and we're doing everything we can to reduce that.
Well, this is Martha again. I think that Catherine Reeves will answer the question. She has some statistics that divide minors versus adults, and maybe she'll be able to address the question a little bit better because we're moving on to that step. So I agree with Cody that's to have gotten 2017 off the table, off of your desk, is pretty good, considering how hard everybody's working.
Yep, this is Cody. Narayan, can I ask, you said that there were about 40 comments regarding inclusion of pregnancy and the unborn infant in the program. Is it possible to summarize easily what those comments were? Or are they all over?
Yeah, it's hard for me to generalize. The comments by statute, you know, this category is going to be added to the table. That is not up for, you know, that's a statutory requirement. Yes. So we're going to do that. So the comments, really what we were asking for is how the table should appear, if there's anyone had any comments in terms of wording and so forth. Many of the comments we received were sort of outside that range and discussed general topics related to vaccine safety and pregnancy. And so they were dealt with that. So the final rule, we may not be really addressing responding to those comments because that wasn't really the scope of the final rule. The final rule is going to basically add this category as per the statutory requirement.
Fine. Yep. And we've discussed that.
Dr. Nair, I have just one more question. On my notes, it's page 9. It's the trust funds balance. Can you explain prior year refunds? Why was there almost a 5? Where would refunds come from?
Yeah, thanks for the question. As I understand it, there's two sources for the refunds. When someone receives compensation, and again, this is sort of outside my expertise, so I'm going to put it kind of as layperson terms. They may receive a trust, which can go on for several years, and if unfortunately if they pass away before that trust, if a trust lasts for 20 years and they pass away in year 18, then the remainder of that trust goes back into the trust fund. It doesn't come to HRSA or to DOJ or to court. It just goes back to the trust fund, and that's sort of the preconditions of the trust. So that's some of it, that refund. The other part is when we're awarding compensation throughout the year, we're talking upwards of $200 million. We basically ask for allotment so that there's not a delay in someone receiving compensation. And so, not to get into the minutia, but we may ask, hypothetically, we may ask for $20 million, knowing that we have several cases that are going to need compensating. And towards the end of the year, if we were to ask for $20 million, but we only needed $18 million, as when we get the final paperwork, we only need $18 million. That resulting $2 million would go back into the trust fund at the end of the fiscal year. So those are the two sources for that prior year refunds. I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job explaining that.
No, that's fine. I just have one final question, just because I keep getting asked this question. If someone does have a flu or they suspect that they've had an injury from their flu vaccine, is the only avenue for compensation through this program, or can someone, for example, if you're at Walgreens and this happened to you, can you sue Walgreens? A lot of people would like clarification on that.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person in terms of providing legal advice. I would encourage them. What I would encourage people to do is they can look at the website, and I believe there's a lot of resources there, and then certainly on the court's website has a list of vaccine attorneys, and that would probably be the best place I would refer them, because that's their area of expertise. They'll be able to tell them exactly the conditions and and where they may be able to seek avenues of compensation.
Thank you. Are there any final questions for Dr. Nair? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nair. Our next presentation is a report from the Department of Justice. Catherine, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
It looks like your PowerPoint is up and you're ready to go. Good morning to you, and thank you for being a part of our call.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this information. We could go to the first slide. Actually, the second slide. I think there was a question a few minutes ago about the breakdown. This of course, is a breakdown just for the reporting period, which we do on a quarterly basis between August 16th of this year and on November 15th. There were 375 claims filed, of which 23 were for minors and 352 were for adults. So that's just for the reporting period, but to answer the question that was raised, I think we continue to see that the vast majority of cases that are being filed in the program are being filed on behalf of adults and not children. Next slide, please. So for the reporting period, there were 181 petitions adjudicated, which is slightly down from the last reporting period. It's like 17 adjudications less, which is I don't see as being significant. 144 of those cases were compensated. 52 were compensated via a proffer, a decision adopting a proffer. Of the cases not conceded, which were 92, those were resolved, 89 of those were resolved via a settlement, and 3 of those cases were resolved by a special master issuing a decision on damages. And then there were 37 cases that were either not compensated or dismissed, which most of them were non-OAP, non-omnibus autism proceeding cases, and there was 1 case left over from the OAP that was also dismissed. Next slide, please. And then there were 6 petitions that were voluntarily withdrawn during this reporting period, which means no judgment will issue in those cases. Next slide, please. Moving on to decisions in cases filed at the Federal Circuit. We received 2 decisions in the Gator and Rojero cases. Those were cases that were appealed to the Federal Circuit by petitioners. Appeals by respondent, there were no decisions in those cases during the reporting period. Next slide, please. As you can see, there are a number of cases pending at the Federal Circuit, most of which were filed by petitioners, and most of which are on issues of entitlement. That includes the Boatmon case, which was reversed based on the government's appeal to the Court of Federal Claims. Was reversed by the judge, the finding of entitlement by the special master, and has now been appealed by the petitioners to the Federal Circuit. That is in briefing right now. And then another newly filed appeal is the Moxek case. Next slide, please. And then at the Court of Federal Claims, we received decisions in 4 cases that had been filed by petitioners seeking review of a special master's decision denying entitlement, and in 1 case involving attorney's fees. And in all 4 of those cases, the special master's decisions were affirmed. We received no decisions in any cases appealed by the government from the Court of Federal Claims during the reporting period. And we have a lot of cases pending at the Court of Federal Claims. As you can see, this is the first of, there's a continuation onto the next slide of cases that are pending at the Court of Federal Claims, most of which involve entitlement, and all of which were filed by petitioners. If you could go to the next slide, please. There are no cases pending at the Court of Federal Claims that were filed by the respondent. Next slide. We do not have any arguments scheduled at either the Federal Circuit or the Court of Federal Claims as of the end of the reporting period. Please. And then this is the breakdown that we give every ACCV meeting of the cases that have been settled during the reporting period, starting with the case that took the longest to resolve from the time it was filed to the time it was settled. And it goes down to the case that took the least amount of time. So there are several pages here of settlements involving various injuries. You can see from the slide, if we go through them, that most of the cases are resolving around 2 years or less from the date that the petition was filed, if they result in a settlement. You can see that a lot of the cases involve SERVA, the settlements rather, SERVA or GBS, and I can confirm that, as Narayan said, that most of the cases that we're getting these days in the program are SERVA cases related to the flu vaccine. Then if we get through those slides, just the informational slides that we provide at every ACCV meeting that give an appendix of a glossary of terms that are used in our cases. And then there is, at the very end, a flow chart of petition processing in the Office of Special Masters. I think that's it. Oh, and this is the levels of appeal and the appeals process. And I'm happy to answer any questions about any of this.
This is Cody Meissner, and thanks for a very clear presentation. And can you just clarify for me, so in this reporting period, there were no decisions that were reversed, decisions by the special masters that were reversed on appeal. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's during the reporting period. That is correct.
Okay. And the next question I have is, I know that the attorney's fees and the expert's fees are covered by the program during the initial appeal to the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. If that decision is appealed, are those legal expenses also covered by the program, or does the petitioner, and I assume the petitioner is the plaintiff, does he or she absorb those costs?
To answer your question, yes, the fees and costs that are incurred related to appeals that are filed at both the Court of Federal Claims and at the Federal Circuit are generally compensated by the program. The statute actually prohibits petitioner's counsel from charging the petitioners themselves for fees and costs incurred in pursuing any vaccine injury claim, and that includes appeals. There are rarely cases that are appealed that we may raise that we do not feel that the appeal had a reasonable basis. Okay. And sometimes fees are denied on that basis by the court. That doesn't happen very often, but petitioners are not then in turn responsible for paying those fees and costs for appeal.
I mean, it seems to me that's a very reasonable arrangement. I think it's great.
This is Martha. I have a question about the scheduled oral argument. None seem to be scheduled. Is that just the way the calendar sometimes is, that we just have quiet times, or is there a particular reason why nothing is scheduled at this time?
Yeah, I think it's just that things haven't been scheduled, and I will also tell you that there is not always an argument, especially in cases that are appealed to the Court of Federal Claims. Sometimes the judge will decide the case without having oral argument. It's not required for the Court of Federal Claims to have oral argument on appeals. There generally are arguments in every case filed at the Federal Circuit, but on occasion cases are submitted on the briefs and the parties waive argument. But the reason that there's nothing scheduled during the quarter that I'm reporting on is just that nothing's been scheduled by the court.
There's no reason. It just
no,
is.
There's no reason for it in particular. Okay.
And my other question is, are we, not we, but is it still being, are people preferring, are we still pushing mediation and not going to court? Is that something that we're still doing?
So when you say we, who are you referring to?
Well, at one point, we were given a wonderfully informative report on the mediation process and not having to go all the way to court. I actually should just go to the end of my question. We have a rule that you can't serve on the commission as a member. There seems to be a confusion about who gets to serve on the commission. And one of the confusions was if you mediated your case and it was over, you couldn't serve on the commission. So it's a leading question I'm asking.
So I think I understand the concern that you're raising, and that is that in order to be eligible to serve as a member of the ACCV, as a petitioner, the case has to be resolved via a decision from the court and not via a settlement, which is what usually happens after a mediation has occurred.
Right. Okay. I just wanted that clarified. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And once again, thank you for the terminologies and the all the definitions. It's very helpful to have the glossary of terms. I don't want to go through a meeting without thanking you again.
Well, I appreciate that, and you're very welcome.
Catherine, this is Beth. I I was following the conversation until just the very end there, and I got a little messed up, so I'm hoping you can clarify. So the question that Martha had regarding who is eligible to serve on the ACCV, you were saying, is it correct that participating in mediation in and of itself isn't the excluding factor, it's the settlement?
Right. It's how the case is resolved. That's my understanding of the statutory language. It's the case, someone who's been a petitioner whose case has been adjudicated by the court and not through a settlement would be eligible to serve on the commission, and not someone that's achieved a settlement as a result of mediation. But mediation is not the defining thing. Mediation is one of many ways that a case can be resolved informally without action by the court, other than adopting the parties' agreement at the end of a mediation or a negotiation.
But most mediations lead to a settlement?
I don't know whether most of them do. I would like to think that they do, because that would be the goal, is to try to reach an informal settlement. That's the whole purpose of engaging in a mediation, or we also call it alternative dispute resolution.
Okay.
But I can't tell you for sure that most of the cases that go to mediation settle.
And then also, this is Beth again. So the final few slides, when you were showing, it was the column all the way on the right that was talking about the time. Yep, that's it right there. And so I'm looking at the adjudicated settlements all the way on the right, petition filing to settlement filing. And I think you had said that a lot of cases are resolved in about 2 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's amazing. So I just wanted to commend you and your office for that.
Oh, well, thank you very much. You know, we're faced by the same challenges that the DICP is, in that we really don't have sufficient resources to address the crushing caseload that we currently have. But I feel like we're doing a pretty good job considering what we have to work with, and both DICP and our office staff are working very, very hard.
All right, are there any final questions from any of the commissioners for Catherine? All right, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is an ACCV work group update, which Martha is going to present. And I know your group's been working really hard, Martha, so we look forward to hearing the report.
Well, we have several, and Annie, I don't know if this could be the time. Could we fast forward to unfinished business from September? Would this be a time that we could do that? Because that was something the work group has worked hard on, the recommendation for increased funding. Could we discuss that now, or shall we wait until it's Annie's?
We can discuss it now.
We had some unfinished business from the September. We did not vote on one of the recommendations that we had, and it's apropos to what we just heard from the last two speakers. We have a draft letter asking for increased funding, and I want to open that up for conversation, see if we can get it from draft to actually getting it out and over to the Secretary's office. Does anyone have anything to add to it, or any typos or anything that they would like to do that? It's at number 6, and it's draft recommendation for increased funding to support additional special masters, staffing, and or funding resources for the VICP. Does anyone want to add anything to it? Do you want, or can we approve it? Can we vote on this, approve it, and get this sent over to the Secretary's office? Cody, do you have anything to add?
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you, okay. Yeah, nope, I don't have anything to add, Martha.
Okay. Beth?
I don't, actually. I think it's really well written. I think it gets to the core of what some of the concerns have been for ACCV, and actually I would make a motion that we accept the draft of this letter and move forward.
This is Alexandra. I just have one small comment. Did we want to add fiscal year 2018 here, since we do have final figures?
Alexandra, this is John Howie. You stole my thunder.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go back on mute. Bye.
No, I was wondering the exact same thing. Obviously, it would continue to demonstrate that this is not this is an ongoing trend, that this is a reoccurring problem.
Yeah.
We agree that we should add 2018.
Okay.
Yes? Yes. In other words, let's update the letter. Wherever the letter has a dated, we should update it to today. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, and that starts with the very first sentence.
Yes, from FY 2013 to FY 2017. So wherever there's an updated needed, is more than double from 504 to 1243, wherever it needs to be updated. Can we approve this and assume that it will be updated and mailed without looking at it again with corrections?
So Martha, this is Tamara. Yes, we can update it, and before the letter is sent to the secretary, it will be sent to Beth and Cody to sign as chair and vice chair, so they'll have the opportunity to review it again, and they can verify that the 2018 numbers have been added. But yes, as a commission, you can approve this recommendation with the stipulation that the 2018 data be included.
That sounds great.
So Martha, this is Beth, so I'll restate my motion.
This is
so my
John Howie,
motion,
I'll second.
John, you can't second before I make the motion.
Oh, I thought you did.
Oh. All right, so the new motion is that we accept the letter as written, except for the places where the data need to be updated to include fiscal year 2018.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I have, and then what okay, never mind. I have one more thing to add, Beth, about the letter, but go ahead. Let's finish voting.
This is John Howie. I agree.
And Kathy Gaffney, I agree.
Alexandra Stewart, I agree.
Tina Tan, I agree.
Now, Beth, I have a question about this letter. I ask this almost every meeting. It gets sent over, and somebody reads it. What can we do as ACCV members, number one, to make sure that it's read, and what can we do to help this? What can we do as members so that we could, I know the L word, lobby, is not the correct word, but what can we do to strengthen the letter's requests?
So this is Beth. I believe, we have had success in making suggestions, such as those that we did for pregnant women. And I know we had a discussion recently on this, but I can't remember which meeting it was in, where I think it was Tamara that was saying it does go forward. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask for a response within a certain time period, Tamara. Is that something that we could do?
Are we allowed to be pushy?
Sure, you all can include, sort of what you want in it, as long as it's within the scope of the ACCV's functions. So sure.
So we're advising, and then just at the end of the letter we'll say, something to the effect of, and Cody, if it comes to you and I to sign, so something about requesting a response maybe before the next meeting in March?
Well, if not March, March. Got lots of time. They just have to acknowledge that there's been reception. Yeah, March. Is that good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. Now, going back to the last meeting that we had in the work group, I would love to say that we came up with some answers and that we have something definitive to tell the commission. But we had a really productive 1 hour of thinking, and Beth just came up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what if we do this or what if we do that? And as we all recall, the last time we met, we came up with the idea of a survey. I would call it, for the lack of another word, an exit survey, an exit interview. When you leave a program, a lot of them do an exit interview. There is no exit interview when you participate in the vaccine court. For example, no one's ever contacted us about Jeffrey. No one's ever asked us if there's been no TripAdvisor review. and we don't really know a lot of statistics on I don't know exactly how many thousands of people have gone the distance, both winning and not winning. But the thought was to have a survey of all the people who participated in the court process. Well, at first we thought, through John and the other lawyers, that they could just contact their clients and ask, where did you find out about the court? Who told you about the court? How long were you in the process? How did the process work? Well, in the course of talking, several people suggested, well, that's awfully subjective. It's not objective. Do we want to have an objective survey? Well, that is going to really open it up. Who are we going to ask? Who do we want to contact? And so we had this really productive meeting, a teleconference last week, and questions were, well, who would pay for it? None of us are professionally trained to do surveys, so who would we hire? Is that within our budget? Do we have the budget to do a survey? So in the course of talking, we actually brought up more questions and opened up more issues than we meant to. We thought a survey would just be a simple contact the past petitioners and find out how they are, and mainly how did they find out about the court. There's a assumption that maybe the majority of people in America don't even know it exists. And so that's where we left it off the other day. Alexandra, do you, in your minutes, am I reflecting our conversation appropriately?
Yes, yes, you are. I think we really have agreed to the notion that we have to have a survey. A survey would be a good first step, but we're still working on the details.
And that's where we come back to the commission, because, here's how I'm kind of looking at it. We've got a product. Let's just call the vaccine a product. The vaccine schedule, the vaccine, all of it is a product. And we're trying to find out, we're trying to do some managing of that product. Let's look at it that way. Let's not look at it with emotions or any of that stuff. Just how did we do, and and how did people find out about the court? That's of great concern to me, because I don't know anyone who knows anything about it. So, Beth, can we open this up to seeing what other people might have to offer to the work group's conversation?
Yes, absolutely.
And I really love the way you really were such a professor about it, bringing up, well, if we do that, then what do we do with this? And it was a fascinating conversation of, well, if we open it up to other people, that adds, and then it was a wonderful conversation we all had. I applaud ourselves. But it did open us up to, now what? So we do need a survey. We do need to find out I actually think that once the survey is done, I think every time someone is finished with the program, it should just be done pro forma from then on. There should be some type of a exit interview.
Well, this is Alexandra. Maybe we could ask the full commission if they would agree to the idea that we pursue the development of a survey first.
Okay.
Then if the commission agrees to that, I was thinking that there are other annual surveys that are conducted by the CDC, for example. They do the NIS, National Immunization Survey. There are 3 of them, and they're done annually. They're conducted by the University of Chicago. Maybe we could even attach a couple of questions to that survey so that we aren't duplicating everything. I don't even know. For all I know, they may ask a question about vaccine injuries. There are other surveys being conducted by the federal government, and we should investigate those as well if the commission agrees that a survey is a good idea.
Hi, this is Kathy Gaffney. I really appreciate your comments and obviously a lot of work being done by the work group. And one of my initial reactions would be for us to, and especially in answering Alexandra's question, is for the first step, what is the purpose of the survey? What is the question that affects the design of the questions you'd ask? And what I have heard Martha saying, which my sense is what you're trying to get to, is for those individuals who have experienced the process, I heard her saying, how did you find out about it? But I wonder if that's the purpose. It'll make a difference, I would think, on the audience to whom you would try to reach out to get the information, and also what questions you want them to answer.
Well, that was part of, this is Martha again, that was part of, that has been the crux of all of our conversations, is at first, John and I were thinking it should just be people who have gone through the process, find out how they did, where did, just them, only them. Because there's not that many, and it would be slightly easier to find out that. Then the conversation evolved to your question, should we include other people?
Right.
So welcome to our work group. This is the conversation that we've been having. Is what I want. My goal as the parent of somebody who's been injured and been through the process is I'm really disturbed that people don't know that there's somewhere to go for help, and that concerns me the most. That people, they need to find out that we exist. That's my personal, as a parent and representing parents, a lot of people don't know that there's a way to get help. So, John, I haven't heard anything from you. What do you think?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Martha, I think you're doing a great job. I mean, the problem is we're still in a pretty early phase of this process of determining, what it's going to be and how it's going to be.
I think, I love the phrase, I don't care what we do, let's just do it. It's a great sports phrase. We could easily, well, not easily, John, I'm not saying this is an easy thing, we could just limit this survey to the people who have gone through the system. That's it. And the goal would be to find out how they found out about it and how long. We don't really, actually, we've addressed how long things are going to take because we just had 2 reports about improvement in how long things are taking, I guess. But how did they find out about it, and who told them about it? Just those 2 questions would be worth knowing the answers to. And I don't know exactly how many people, and John, I think you had agreed that it should be people who not just won their adjudication, but also people who were part of the process who did not win. So it'd be both people.
Or people that took a settlement because settlements are taken for a number of different reasons.
Exactly.
Some people do it because they don't feel strong on their claim. Some people do it because, when you tell them you're not going to get a trial setting for 2 or 3 years, they say, well, I'm not going to wait 2 or 3 years. And they take less money.
So how many, can you, John or Dr. Nair, can somebody give us an estimate if we close this to only people who have been part of the Vaccine Injury Compensation Court program? Are we talking 5,000 people, 10,000? Just really, truly a ballpark figure, John. How many people do you think that would be?
Well, I think just based on the numbers that we've seen, it depends on how far back you want to go. The further back you want to go, I would assume there's going to be less interest in taking the time to fill out the survey. So if you're just looking at current numbers with 1,200 being filed past 2-3 years, and then I think 400 to 500 being filed for the 2 to 3 years before that, a few thousand.
So the last, so ended at 2000? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant year 2000. You mean people 2000. Okay, I get it.
A few thousand.
Yeah. Well, that seems doable to me. That seems like something that is, we're only asking some facts. And Alexandra had brought up that we didn't want to ask questions that were subjective and leading. You can ask a question 5 different ways and get 5 different answers, and it's the same question. So we didn't want to ask any leading questions, but if you're only asking, how did you find out about the program? Who told you about the program? And there you go. That's worth knowing.
And this is Kathy Gaffney. Further, are we talking about just those children affected, families with
No, we would be talking about anyone who was part of the program, adult or parent of a vaccine-injured child. It'd be both. It'd be both.
Okay.
Especially since considering the last few years, it's majority adults.
That's what I was thinking about. Your number would be far smaller if it was just children.
Yeah. Well, the questions you would ask to a parent of a vaccine-injured child are really, in many ways, would be a different survey, I think. I mean, that would just be my thought. My concerns as Jeffrey's trustee are a little bit different than if John has a client who's an adult with cervical injuries. It's a complete, you kind of got kind of mixing your stuff there, but it's a thought. Tina, did you have anything to add to our conversation?
No, I mean, I completely agree with what's been discussed, and I think a survey of those individuals who either have been through this, probably the easiest thing would be through the system so that they can basically say how they found out about this.
Right.
And
Dina, go ahead. I'm sorry, Beth, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, as I recall in the work group meeting, I believe where we ended, and I could be wrong, was we came around to, okay, so remember the role of the commission is to advise the secretary. Mm-hmm. And while we aren't a research group or a data collection group, there would be a recommendation, or we would advise the secretary on what information was needed.
Exactly.
And then the secretary would go forward with how to actually collect the data. Is that where we ended?
Yes, because it was decided that, number one, we don't have the resources to do it. And there was an awful lot of, just so everyone knows, there was a lot of conversation last week about the funding for something like this and where could someone find the funding. And Tamara had some good suggestions of where we cannot find it. But I think that if we ask the secretary that the purpose of this is to help strengthen the vaccine court. So we could send a letter asking him. Is that how we ended it, Alexandra? I think that's how the conversation ended, that we would...
Yes, we decided in the work group that we could develop a recommendation to the Secretary to request that the Secretary support the development of a survey. The population, the respondents, we had not really decided upon yet.
No.
It sounds like we are now going to restrict the survey to only those individuals, families who have gone through touch the program.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and adults, not just families, but individuals
yes.
as well.
Yes.
I'm just saying, I'm just kept pushing that for a very practical reason. It can be done. We can get this accomplished. This is something that's not so big that it can't get done. And it would be nice, sometimes you can't get everything you want. You just get one step done. And if we can find out that the 3,000 people that participated in the court found it out by accident, that would be disturbing to find out. Or if we find out that it was a systemic thing, that they found out the way you're supposed to find out, that would be reassuring too. But it'd be interesting to know. And once again, this all comes from our personal experience in the court. The only way we found out about it was we changed pediatric neurologists, and our pediatric neurologist was an expert witness for the government in these cases. And we would never have found out about it if we hadn't switched pediatric neurologists. We never would have known. We never would have known. So that's disturbing. It's a flaw in the system, and the system is there. Henry Waxman did not set this up for it to be a bureaucratic nightmare that makes you cry. He set this up to help people, and I think it's gone away from its mission, its original mission. So it'd be nice to get it back to its original mission, which is to help people. So anyway, that's my thought. And of course, the other thing we always discuss at the work group is who gets to be on the commission. And there was a conversation that we wanted to have it clarified that who gets to be on it. After seeing the numbers of adults versus children that are in the system, I'm going to, once again, we talked about it at every work group, a person with a vaccine injury should qualify as a commission member, not just as a member of the general public. Nothing against Nurse Gaffney, but we have two parents now on the commission. Well, we have me, and we have a position that's vacant. Tamara, what would we need to do to change the definition of a member so that we can include a person with a vaccine injury?
So, Martha, generally to make changes to the composition of the ACCV requires a legislative change because the composition of the ACCV is actually in the legislation.
Okay.
So,
and that would go through the Secretary?
Yes. It would be a recommendation to the Secretary.
Okay. What do you think, John?
I think it would be a great idea. Obviously, we've been sitting in a position without another parent rep now for a year. What I believe is that a lot of these parents who have a child who has been injured, their time is spent, taking care of their child, and so it leaves us with a pretty small pool of people that we're looking at who can afford to share the time that they have with this committee as opposed to worrying about their children.
Well, also we've determined that the pool is also defined by those people who, the settlement, mediation, all that. The pool is pretty small, but now we've discovered that the majority of people who are filing for injuries are adults,
right?
And they're not represented on the commission. And people will know from my first meeting when I first met you all, that was my first question was, my son is 23 years old and he's more than qualified to serve on this commission, but he's not the parent, he's the person, he's the vaccine-injured person. So we're talking about people without people, nothing about us without us, and we're talking about people who are vaccine-injured and they're not on the commission.
This is Alexandra. I agree with you, Martha. That was one of my first questions as well. I think that an adult...
You and I sat next to each other eating chocolate, and we both came up with that question. That's right.
Yes. I think that an adult who has been injured by as a server injury, should be permitted to be included in the commission. I recognize that would involve a legislative change, but perhaps the commission would be willing to agree to have us develop a recommendation to the Secretary to implement that legislative change.
Well, and that is one of the basic disability human rights, nothing about us without us, is sort of a basic bumper sticker in the disability world. And I continue to be embarrassed that I'm speaking on behalf of my son, who's more than capable of speaking on his own behalf. I just think it's a really, and I just go back to the numbers, 694 people filed, most of them were adults.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a relatively easy change. I just think that the language did not contemplate adults. That's all. So maybe the work group then can develop a formal recommendation to present to the full commission.
Do we need to do that, or can we have that conversation now and have the full commission agree that that's something that we want to draft that letter?
Okay.
Can we expedite that without going back to the work group and then going back to the March meeting? Beth, do you have an idea on that?
My guess is that it would need to be a discussion in the work group, and then it would be brought forward again with a letter already drafted, so that the rest of the commission would just be reviewing the letter.
Okay.
This is Alexandra. There was one other issue that came up in the work group around the general public learning about the program. And we talked about how some of us receive our flu vaccines every year at grocery stores and other retail outlets, and that we never, in fact, receive a VIS statement. I talked about how we had asked for the statement and we were told to download it off of the drugstore's website. So that speaks directly to trying to understand how people can learn about the program, because the program is discussed on the back of the VIS statements. It's one way, maybe an inadequate way, but it is one way that the general public can learn about the program. So maybe that could be, if we're going to confine our survey to only people who were involved with the program, we could somehow discuss the distribution of the VIS statements, have some kind of recommendation to the Secretary to implement an educational program for vaccinators to ensure that they distribute those VIS statements, because that is part of the law. They are required by federal law to distribute those forms. And if they are not doing so, then that helps hinder the public from learning about the program.
Well, this is Martha again. I have a silly question. It just shows you how old I am. Does the Ad Council still put ads on TV that are on behalf of the public good? I mean, when I was younger, I used to, the Ad Council would, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something for the public good, but it would seem to me that in the new world order, lots of paper, people throw it away. We're trying to become a paperless society. It seems to me that everyone knows the jingle to McDonald's because it's on TV all the time, it's on the radio all the time. Could there be some type of a Smokey Bear ad council campaign on this subject? We're just kind of going big there. I mean, that's a big topic, but handing out a piece of paper, people just throw them away.
Well, that may well be true, but it is the law. And one of the things that we can do, the least thing that we can do is at least require or help educate providers as to ensure that they distribute those forms.
Right.
That's what we can do.
That's right.
It's not a small thing.
No, it's not. I agree with you completely. Cody, at Tufts, how do they distribute it? I'm sure that you're kind of like way above, since you're the chief of the division. Do you know how they do that at Tufts? I mean, do they have it just at Kaiser? They just have it in a pile in the room where you see the doctor. It's just in a big pile. I mean, you can either take it or not. How does Tufts do it? I think he's trying to unmute himself. Or Tina, you're there. How do you guys do it in Chicago? Do they have it just sitting?
No, actually, anytime someone gets a vaccine, at least where I work, they give them the VIS sheet.
Okay.
So it is given to them. It's not just sitting there.
It's not just sitting there. Beth, how about you guys at BYU?
I'm not sure about the BYU immunization clinic. I'd have to look into that. But, you know, I work as a family nurse practitioner, and we certainly hand it out at the family practice clinic.
And the only reason I ask is what's working, what works, and as Alexandra said, it is the law, but how can we make that work? That's why I'm asking. I don't mean to sound judgmental. I'm just kind of wondering if you guys are there and you see what's working.
Mm-hmm. And this is Kathy Gaffney, and I'm at a pediatric clinic, and we give the information in both Spanish and English, and it's done in two ways. The individuals are given a piece of paper, but there's also a loose leaf binder in the room that has the medical assistants will open up to the pages of what the child is going to receive and point out what they're having and the forms that are there available, the paper forms. But the interesting thing we run into is that our families often leave the papers behind.
Right, exactly.
So it becomes a big recycling issue.
Right.
So using both methods has been the best we've been able to come up with so far, meaning there's a copy that everybody gets to look at and use while they're in the room, and there's another copy to bring home for them and their families to have in their houses. But I don't think any of us think that even that combination of methods really gets the information home. I don't know how many people really read it.
I absolutely agree with you. But, and you know, my information about not receiving the form is personal information. I know for a fact that no one gives it to us. However, that's anecdotal information. So, and then combined with the notion that people are saying they don't know anything about this program. So I agree that a TV ad would be probably the best thing to do, or some kind of a email campaign or something, but that's out of our control.
Yeah,
the only thing that we can control is try to help people support the distribution of those forms, which I know is not happening.
I think one of the other problems is just the simple fact that when people are getting a vaccine, they don't understand or comprehend that they might have an adverse reaction. And so depending on how long after the vaccination is administered, they've probably long forgotten where those forms are, what they said, or anything else. So it's really at the point in time when somebody says, I've got a real serious problem, at least what I'm finding, is that they get online and they start searching, and what they find is lawyer websites that define CERVA, and, oh, this may be what I have, that type of thing.
Well, there's also the elephant in the room that it's a conversation that people, I'm just going to bring up the man who, in New York, the elected official in New York City who just recently passed away 2 weeks after he got his flu vaccine. And boy, that conversation in the New York papers is loaded with vitriol and argument, and, you know, people are saying, geez, is there a connection between his death and his flu shot? And wow, you know, so it's a loaded conversation sometimes. You know, once again, anecdotal, we asked why Jeffrey was having seizures 24 hours after he got his shot, and we were told it didn't matter. Well, it does. So it's a loaded question that makes it even more problematic to find out that there's help.
It's just so interesting because the whole notion, frankly, of informed consent is that you learn this stuff right before you get the procedure, whatever the procedure is.
Right.
So maybe what we could do is, or we could, well, the medical community could think about having some kind of informed consent discussion paragraph right before you actually give the vaccine. That might be helpful.
Because we don't want to go out and scare the heck out of people.
No, that's right, you don't.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there's the other hand. I mean,
right.
Once again, it's a loaded conversation.
The other hand is Jeffrey and all these people who are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a loaded conversation that is emotional, political, it's all of it. And so it suddenly has occurred to me that we've used up more than our time, Annie.
Okay, sorry.
So, no, it's okay. Annie, I guess the work group has lots of stuff that we've been talking about. We've approved the letter, the draft letter to the Secretary for funding. We will draft a letter about the survey and about who gets to be on the commission. Am I correct, Alexander? Is that what we have decided today?
Yes.
The reason I keep going to Alexandra is that she keeps the minutes in the meeting because with my arthritis I can't do that. So she's sort of like our, she keeps our diary. So I guess that's our report, Beth.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are running about 35 minutes ahead of schedule. We're scheduled to have lunch at noon. I was wondering if Dr. McNeil...
Can we skip lunch? Are we allowed to skip lunch and just keep moving?
We can definitely go forward with Dr. McNeil if he's ready. He's scheduled for a 15-minute presentation, and then perhaps after his presentation we can talk about whether or not we're good to keep going or if we need a short break or what needs to happen. I can see that Dr. McNeil's presentation has been brought up online. Dr. McNeil, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you for starting a little bit early.
No, this is no problem, and this is going to be a brief report. So I'm sure everyone will be able to make lunch. So this is the update from the Immunization Safety Office at the Centers for Disease Control. Next slide. Next slide. I'm going to cover only really one of these topics in depth. Next slide, please. The presentations at the October ACRP meeting earlier this year. Next slide, please. Now, there was one vote at the meeting It had to do with the use of hepatitis A vaccines for routine vaccination of the homeless. Routine two-dose hepatitis A vaccination of the homeless would reduce both hepatitis A infection risk in this vulnerable population and the risk of large-scale outbreaks. And the recommendation was that all persons aged 1 year or older experiencing homelessness should be routinely immunized against hepatitis A. Hepatitis A vaccine is a very very effective vaccine, and coverage has been rather low, particularly in adults, and homelessness has been identified as a high-risk group for both outbreaks of hepatitis A and the severity and adverse outcomes of hepatitis A infection. Next slide, please. So this was a presentation by our office on a paper. The manuscripts actually was attached. This was published in Pediatrics. This looked at HPV vaccine and the study of primary ovarian insufficiency and adolescent vaccination. This study was conducted by one of the VSD sites, the Kaiser Northwest site, from August 2006 to December 2014. You can see that they were able to study a number of adolescent vaccines in addition to HPV, and you can see the results. The hazard ratios all cross 1, so the conclusion was that there was no evidence of an increased risk of primary ovarian insufficiency after HPV or other adolescent vaccinations. Next slide, please. I realize this is perhaps tangential to ACCV, but interestingly, HPV vaccine there is data to suggest that it may be effective if given to older age groups. So data has been submitted to the FDA in support of expanding the age range through 45 years, and the work group is actually considering US data to inform a policy consideration for vaccination of this mid-adult range. And the data that's relevant, HPV incidence does decrease with age, but adults can experience new infections. Many adults are already exposed to a non-valent HPV type, but not to all the types. So there may be scope to prevent infection with some of these types, even in older age people. 4-valent HPV post-licensure data in 6 countries shows lower vaccine effectiveness, of course, with as expected, with increasing age of vaccination. And they are also reviewing data from health economic models of the 9-valent in terms of benefits and costs, and this work's ongoing. Next slide, please. So there was, this is the influenza, next slide, influenza session. And there's an international collaboration called the PREVENT Network, and there was a presentation of data from this network, they collected information on acute respiratory or febrile illness, hospitalizations in pregnant women 18 to 50 years of age, identified using the ICD-9 or ICD-10 discharge diagnosis codes, and also contemporaneous clinician-ordered real-time reverse RT-PCR testing for influenza. So this study used the test negative design, which is believed to minimize biases associated with access to influenza vaccines and health care seeking. And the findings were that across the sites, and this was international sites and seasons from 2010 to 2016, that influenza vaccines had the potential to prevent 40% of influenza-associated hospitalizations during pregnancy. Next slide, please. Also in the influenza session, there was a presentation, next slide, on a study that looked at half first full dose influenza vaccine in children. Can we move to the next slide? Excellent. So this was presented by representatives from Sanofi Pasteur, and there are some other countries which have approved use of the adult dose in children, and the goal is to improve immunogenicity. And the presentation focused on a phase 4 randomized observer-blinded 2-arm multi-center study in a cohort in the US of more than 2,000 healthy children 6 to 35 months. And the results were that the safety profile of the full dose, the 0.5 ml that's given to adults, was similar to the half dose, the 0.25 ml dose, and that it may be more immunogenic. And this was, these findings were consistent with findings from other studies. And a biologic license application has been submitted to the FDA to permit the use of this dose of Fluzone quadrivalent in children as young as 6 months of age. Next slide, please. This is just to inform the ACCV members that the pertussis vaccine work group has been convened, and the purpose is to consider repeat Tdap vaccination. So as you'll remember, the FDA label specifies single-use language, and one of the manufacturers has filed a biologic license application, and reviews expected in January 2019. This also, there's a practical consideration that many providers don't stock both the TD, the reduced diphtheria tetanus shot, and the Tdap vaccines. So allowing Tdap for the decennial TD booster would be easier for providers. And findings of revaccination studies by Adacel, of Adacel by Sanofi and Boostrix by GSK suggest these vaccines are safe and effective when administered 8 to 12 years following prior Adacel or 9 to 10 years after prior Boostrix administration. Next slide. I think that's my last slide. There were a number of publications attached for the committee, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McNeil. Before we go any further, I want to just make sure that Cody was able to get on the line. Cody, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. I called in again I got disconnected and called several times and couldn't get through. But I guess you can hear me now. At some point I wanted to address some of Martha's comments too. But I know you're way out of that. We're on flu and HPV, so I can wait.
No, it's okay. Let's finish with Dr. McNeil first.
Yep.
I think it's very interesting, the Pertussis work group from ACIP and removing the single-use language. I mean, that's a very interesting thing to me. So thank you for presenting that. Do any of the other commissioners have any questions that or any points that need to be clarified with Dr. McNeil? All right. Thank you, Dr. McNeil. So go ahead, Cody, if we need to circle back and just kind of finish the conversation before.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And I apologize for not being able to comment earlier. So thank you again for giving me a second chance. Because I think the discussion was quite interesting, and it's a very important one. And there were really two main comments. Number one, yes, the vaccine information sheet is handed out to patients with administration of any vaccine, but the truth of the matter, I mean, the reality is most patients don't read it, and so I think that's part of the problem. And then the other point I wanted to make is if a patient gets a vaccine and there is a complication following that, and it is presented to the provider should tell you to contact the FDA regarding that adverse reaction and should alert a person. Now, it sounds like, Martha, your child had a seizure activity, and I guess that information wasn't conveyed to you, but we certainly here at Tufts, all of our residents are trained to report any adverse reactions and to follow through. The suggestion that and third and last point I'll make, the suggestion that the vaccine provider should spend more time talking about that, it's a great suggestion, but in point of fact, there are so many vaccines that are administered at a visit. To expect that the nurse or the physician is going to spend more time talking about the possibility of an adverse reaction when in fact it's 1 per million doses. I mean, it's so rare that I don't think that's a very practical proposal. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you again.
Okay, Dr. Cody, this is Alexandra. I totally agree with you. A discussion about adverse events does not have to occur legally if the possibility is highly remote that an individual will experience that adverse event. But I was just thinking that we were talking about ways to help ensure the public learns about the program. And the only way that I know of is that, they are supposed to get that VIS statement. And I realize that people are not reading it. But in many cases, they're not even getting the paper at all. But you're absolutely correct.
Yep, and I fully concur with the idea that there has to be wider dissemination about the availability of the program. And I guess we need some more thought about, and maybe Narayan, you may have some, I don't think I heard any comments from you all, I might have missed it. If you thought about how we could get increased awareness of the existence of the program.
Yeah, this is Narayan. Thanks for the question. We do try and do outreach, and I'll just kind of go through historically. What the program used to do was we would send folks to conferences, and I believe we even had a booth and would educate providers and things. I think a number of things changed in terms of budget and traveling people and the increased caseload. We weren't able to devote resources to that. And our focus has been still to make people aware of the program. We did recently revamp our website to make it more accessible so people could learn about the program. We're continuing to do some outreach efforts as we can, if it includes, for instance, presenting at a distance where we don't necessarily have to fly staff out and remotely presenting and sharing resources. But that is a big priority for us to make sure that the public is educated about the program. I think the discussion about the VIS statements is very pertinent. That's the law, is that people should be provided with those, and it's unfortunate that's not occurring. Because our information, and I think it's written very nicely and summarized very nicely on a very brief piece of paper that it's unfortunate people don't receive that when they get their vaccine and don't have access to reference that at a later time.
And
this is Alexandra.
You and I had commented earlier. One way we could increase visibility would be helpful if you could make a presentation to the Red Book Committee for the American Academy of Pediatrics or the Committee on Infectious Diseases, just so that they may have the group may have some suggestions for you as to how we could increase awareness of this program.
Yes. Cody, I have a question for you. This is Alexandra. When you said that your residents typically will report a vaccine injury or potential vaccine injury, are you referring to the VERS system?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but they also know about this program and the ACCV and program, and maybe that's because I tell them about it and tell them about vaccines. But yeah, they certainly are, and our residents do make reports.
Yes. Yes, the VERS system is used. I was not aware that they knew much about this program, but I know they know about VERS. So that's good on you, Cody.
Yep. No, I try and tie them in because I think people should be aware.
Absolutely.
And this is Narayan again. I forgot to add one thing we have been doing is when we find outside either government or non-government organizations involved in vaccination, we do try and encourage them to link to our website and provide information about our program. And VERS is one of those where it's very clear, I think, on the VERS website you can find information about our program.
All right, anything else on that topic? So I think we do have time to squeeze in. It looks, well, let me double check. Yeah, it looks like our next presentation is 15 minutes, but I'm not quite sure if she's available and ready. Annie?
Claire, are you on the line?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
There she is.
Hi, Claire.
Claire, do you mind going a little earlier than what was on the agenda?
Sure, that's fine, and I have a brief update as well. So today I'll be presenting the update for the National Institutes of Health. And I work with the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID. First slide, please. NIAID is conducting a phase 1 trial with a novel topical adjuvant known as imiquimod or Aldara in combination with the H5N1 influenza vaccine in healthy adults between the ages of 18 through 45. This study is being conducted at the NIAID-funded Vaccine and Treatment Evaluation Unit, VTEU, at the Baylor College of Medicine. This H5N1 vaccine, developed with some NIAID support and manufactured by Sanofi Pasteur, was designed for use in a potential pandemic. The vaccine is made from inactivated influenza virus. After the vaccine was approved by FDA in 2007, it was added to the National Pre-Pandemic Influenza Vaccine Stockpile. Imiquimod cream is commonly used to treat genital warts and certain skin cancers. The cream activates the innate immune system, the body's immediate defense against invading pathogens. The immune-boosting properties of imiquimod could stretch the supply of H5N1 vaccines because fewer doses would be required to achieve sufficient immunity in recipients. This would allow more people to be vaccinated during an outbreak. Next slide, please. NIAID is also supporting a phase 1 trial testing the safety and immune-stimulating ability of an experimental nasal influenza vaccine in healthy 9 to 17-year-old children and teens. The vaccine, developed by FluGen, is made from a strain of seasonal influenza virus known as H3N2. Investigators hypothesize that volunteers who receive the candidate vaccine will have a robust immune response not only against H3N2 strains, but also against flu strains that are mismatched to the vaccine strain. This trial is being conducted at the St. Louis University VTEU. Half the study participants will receive the candidate nasal vaccine, and the other half will receive a dose of inactive saline solution delivered as a nasal spray. All volunteers will receive licensed quadrivalent seasonal influenza vaccine 3 months after receiving the initial nasal vaccine or placebo. An important objective of the study is to determine whether the combination of licensed and experimental vaccine leads to broader protection against influenza viruses compared with the licensed vaccine alone. Next slide, please. We have several new videos on the 1918 influenza pandemic posted on the NIAID Now blog. These include the videos shown here, what was the 1918 influenza pandemic, and could the 1918 influenza pandemic happen again, as well as an interview with NIAID scientist Dr. Jeffrey Taubenberger about why he studies the 1918 flu virus. For details, please see the link at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. In 2017, NIAID and Children's National Health System launched a clinical research partnership devoted to treating and preventing allergic, immunologic, and infectious diseases in children. The two institutions also offer joint training opportunities for physician scientists interested in caring for these children while developing their expertise in pediatric immunology and infectious diseases. In this partnership, investigators from the two institutions work together to design and conduct clinical studies to advance prevention strategies, diagnoses, treatments, and cures for a diverse range of pediatric diseases that involve the immune system. The inaugural symposium took place at Children's National in September 2018. Next slide, please. On November 13th, NIAID hosted an informational webinar on new NIAID infectious diseases clinical trial funding opportunities. This webinar provided an overview of the leadership group for an infectious diseases clinical research consortium and the new VTEU funding opportunity, and also addressed questions from potential applicants. Details are available on the NIAID website at the link shown at the bottom of the slide. Next slide, please. On November 13th, CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield delivered the 2018 Joseph J. Kinyoun Memorial Lecture on the intersection between the national opioid crisis and the management of infectious diseases. The lecture titled Opioids, Epidemic of Our Time and Impact on Infectious Disease was held on the NIH campus in Bethesda, Maryland. Dr. Redfield's talk explored the impact of the unprecedented use of opioids in the U.S. on the management of infectious diseases. While overdose remains the leading cause of death among people who use opioids, this population is also disproportionately affected by viral hepatitis, bacterial endocarditis, HIV, and other infections associated with sharing and reusing needles to inject drugs and other behaviors linked to illicit drug use. The archived webinar is available to the public at https://videocast.nih.gov with the search term Kinyun Lecture. And that concludes my talk for today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Are there any questions? All right. Thank you, Claire, for the information, and thanks for being flexible with your schedule. We're coming up on the noon hour, so I think it would be good to have a discussion on what the commissioners would like to do. Would you like to push forward? Do we need a short break?
I'd like to push forward. This is Alexandra.
This is Martha. I'd like to push forward.
Kathy, I would like to push forward.
Tina, I'd like to push forward.
Cody, it's fine with me.
Yeah, this is John. It's fine with me.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead then. I'm hoping, I guess, that Commander Marshall is ready. It looks like, okay, so her presentation has been brought up. Commander Marshall, are you with us?
Amanda,
Yes, I'm here.
can you see if we have Valerie Marshall?
Sure, one moment, please.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, this is Valerie.
Hello.
I'm sorry. I was actually on the line, but my line was muted.
Awesome. Are you okay in giving your presentation a little earlier than expected?
Absolutely.
All right. Awesome. We'll turn the time over to you. Your presentation looks like it's pulled up and ready to go.
Thank you. Good morning. I will provide a brief update on FDA regulatory actions. The FDA is accountable to the American public for helping to ensure the safety, efficacy, and quality of drugs and biological products. Next slide, please. Afluria quadrivalent was previously approved for use in patients 5 years of age and older for the prevention of influenza disease caused by influenza virus types A and B contained in the vaccine. Following the review of the safety and effectiveness data, the FDA approved a supplement to the biologics license application to extend the vaccine for use in persons 6 to 59 months of age. Next slide, please. In October 2018, following an extensive review of the safety and effectiveness data, the FDA approved a supplement to the biologics license application for human papillomavirus 9-valent vaccine, Gardasil, to extend the use of the vaccine to include women and men from 27 to 45 years of age. Dr. McNeil from the CDC mentioned this during his presentation. This approval represents an important opportunity to help prevent HPV-related diseases and cancers in a broader age range. According to the CDC, HPV vaccination prior to becoming infected with the HPV types covered by the vaccine has the potential to prevent more than 90% of these cancers, or approximately 31,000 cases every year, from ever developing. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. Beth, are you there?
I'm here. Is Beth there? Seems like we might have lost some people.
This is Valerie. I'm still here.
I guess if any of the commissioners have questions for Valerie.
No questions. Thank you very much.
Well, this is Cody. I have one question or one comment. Isn't HPV4 licensed for boys starting at 9 years of age too?
Yes. And the
I think it said 16 on your slide, the last slide.
Oh, Cody, let me actually double check that to make sure that that's correct.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 9.
Okay.
Yes, it should be 9.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, thank you for your time. I believe Anna's on the call, and you were with us earlier, right?
Yep, I'm here.
And it looks like your presentation has just been pulled up.
Yeah. Is there any way that my presentation can be viewed in slideshow format? If not, it's not the end of the world, but I do have some graphics in here that I don't know will translate. So my name is Anna Aiken. I'm the Communications Director and the acting designated federal officer of the National Vaccine Advisory Committee. And I just have a very brief update as well. So if we could go to the next slide. I wanted to give an update on the last NVAC meeting that we had. It focused very broadly on vaccine innovation, and we included a number of panel presentations. One was on public and private partnerships that was related to vaccine development. We also had a session that was very interesting on value in vaccines, and we had a panel presentation on advances in 3 different types of vaccination technologies. We held several spotlight sessions as well, one on CMV vaccines that are in the pipeline, not available at market right now, but the new Shingrix vaccine, and a session on funding unmet needs projects that MVPO undertook last year. We also concluded the meeting with a series of presentations related to HPV-related cancers and preventing them. And then we had agency and liaison updates and public comment. The meeting, like this one, is recorded. The slides are available, and the written summary is all on the NVAC portion of the MVPO website. So next slide. We've already sort of announced our meetings for next year, so if folks are interested, you can save the date. Our next meeting will be February 5th. This is a virtual meeting like this one. It will not be held at the HHS building, but it will be available online. And as we get closer to the meeting, we'll provide agenda for everybody. The next thing I wanted to update on, and this is the next slide, and this is why I wanted it in slideshow format, is I had a whole bunch of graphics there, but really just illustrating this social media event that we held called #WhyIFightFlu, and it was really just based to encourage flu vaccination this season. We had a very rough season last year, and so we worked with the Assistant Secretary for Health, Admiral Brett Giroir, and to tell people why we get our flu vaccines and why it might be good for them to get one as well. It's National Influenza Vaccination Week this week as well. So I just wanted to say it's not too late to get your flu vaccine if you haven't already gotten one. We did a really nice blog post. There's a great picture there of the Admiral with his granddaughter and quite a bit of social media outreach and did some supporting materials as well. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about today, next slide, is an effort that we did with our regional offices at HHS around the National Adult Immunization Plan. So several years ago, in 2016, we released this plan just in recognition that most of the adult immunization rates are very low, and we needed to really develop a plan and a vision for moving forward with partners to address this. And so one of the sort of efforts of in implementing part of this plan was this regional activity that we did. And so last year we held 6 different meetings across the country on various adult immunization topics like financing, quality improvement, and communication strategies. And you can see there on the slide it showcases which regions held them. In these meetings we engaged with a variety of stakeholders on ways to take action around those various topics and held one-day meetings to address that. And the next time I'm going to talk a little bit of the lessons learned from the activity, but basically, can you go back to slide 5? Basically, we did think that the activities were successful. We were able to engage nearly 3,000 diverse partners across the nation. And we have a final meeting summary that we put up online if anyone is interested in reading that. In 2019, we are going to go ahead and do 4 more meetings, so we should have representation across all of the different regions. And now we can go to the last slide, which is lessons learned from the first initiative. And so, I mean, I think one of the big things that we learned is that despite operating within, very resource-constrained environments, that there are quite a few stakeholders that are eager to improve adult immunization rates, very passionate about it, really committed to it, and that we can be more impactful when we collaborate and communicate and coordinate with each other. And that there was also a benefit to doing some inter-regional knowledge sharing, and we did that. And there was, furthermore, we encouraged remote participation, and we think that this initiative did help increase the visibility of both MVPO and the adult immunization plan, which is one of our goals. So that's it for me. If folks have questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
Thank you, Anne. Are there any questions?
This is Martha. I have a question regarding things that we've talked about today and then this report. It's Anne's group, I mean, they're busy. They're out there. In all of the social media, we were just discussing this, in all the social media outreach and supporting materials, do you mention the vaccine court?
We don't mention the vaccine court per se, but we have, to speak to Narayan's point earlier, we have actually had him come to speak. We have a interagency vaccine communicators call that we host once a month. And so he has come, he participates in it as well, but he has spoken and talked about the program and how we can integrate their messages into things that we're doing. And he's also he also did a presentation specifically on SERVA. So, we can have coordinated messages on that. So I don't think in any of the social media stuff we've done that, but we have integrated some of the messages into the website and just made sure that vaccines.gov has that. And I think we could prepare some tweets and some things around different observances and things like that to help spread the word as well. We're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Are there any final questions for Ann? All right, thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is to allow for public comment. Amanda, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. If you'd like to ask, if you have a comment, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name slowly and clearly when prompted. Your name is required. As a reminder, that is *1 if you'd like to ask if you have a comment. Our first comment comes from Teresa Rangham. Your line is open.
Thank you. My name is Teresa Rangham. Hold on. There, I don't have. I'm the Executive Director for the National Vaccine Information Center. And I wanted to respond to the discussion around CERVA. I believe when CERVA was added to the table, there was discussion that this wasn't actually a vaccine injury so much as an administration error. And there was discussion about the need for education. It might be of benefit to go back and look at that discussion as the ACCV discusses membership. And then if I understand the need to get more commissioners on board, I would remind the ACCV and the commission that originally the reason adults aren't on that commission is there was no adult schedule at the time, and the law was centered around childhood injury, which is what was happening in the public at that point in time. And rather than resolve to make an existing position one for adults who should have representation since many awards go to adults, if a statutory change could be considered that adds additional commissioners to the commission rather than look at the existing, there's the opportunity to change and expand as well. So just a notation, I wanted to thank the work group for their thoughtful consideration of some of our requests that are, I'm not insinuating that they're just our requests, but MVIC has had concerns around VIS and awareness and so on. The draft resolution for special master funding, while certainly needed, I'm wondering, again, what's being done to close the gaps on vaccine safety science identified by the Institutes of Medicine's 25 years of reporting. When there are gaps in vaccine safety science, I think it must be very difficult for petitioners to bring forward medical expertise that allows them to partake of the safety net that the VICP was supposed to be. And it's a rather vicious circle. I would also say that rating the trust fund to fund closing those gaps should not be a consideration as previously suggested in other previous ACCV meetings prior to this commission, simply because the trust was designed for helping those who were injured and compensating them. So perhaps a resolution could be considered around that. With regard to the survey, one of the concerns MVIC has had and was hoping would be addressed would be around adequacy. We definitely support that there needs to be more awareness. I believe a presentation by the Banyan Group to the MDAC had some marketing and communication strategies. Commissioner Toomey has raised that social media is a powerful force. Raising awareness around the VICP and VAERS is a must, and that's what some of those reports acknowledged. And I would think it should be a part of any communications plan currently underway having anything to do with vaccines. It needs to be a part of that so that people know about the VICP. Because what the Banyan and Alterum reports found is doctors are hesitant to discuss with their patients any sort of injuries, while patients were welcoming that information and it didn't necessarily deter them from vaccination. I think I'll leave it there. I appreciate the opportunity to provide comment, and again, really want to thank the work group for their thoughtful considerations.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank
Amanda,
you, Teresa.
do we have any other public comments? Amanda, does it look like we have any further public comments?
We show no comments at this time.
All right, thank you. Our next item of business, and it's wrapping up in preparation, but is there any new business that we need to discuss at this point? Martha, do you know when the work group will be planning on meeting again?
We had not scheduled the next meeting. Am I correct, Alexandria? We did not do that. Maybe Annie could send out Annie, could you send out a little, I don't even know what those things are called, doodle, whatever that you do. Could you do that again, that thing you do? And we could schedule the next meeting.
Do you want to try to meet in December? Do you want me to try to schedule it for after the December? Okay.
Yeah, because what we want to get done can get done pretty easily. Thank you.
And then future agenda items. Do any of the commissioners have any requests for future agenda items?
My request is always the same. I hope we get to meet in person.
I hope
broken
so
record. I'm a broken record, Beth.
So our next meeting, I'm assuming, would be in March. And Annie, I was thinking that it seems like we usually meet via telephone about 4 to 6 weeks prior to when we think the next meeting might be. But is that what you were thinking too? I think I was thinking March 7th maybe.
Oh, for the next meeting date?
Right.
Yes, we have it on the calendar for the 7th and 8th if needed.
Okay. And then I know it was discussed in work group meeting, but just to disclose to the entire group as well, that there are names for additional new commission members that are being reviewed. So hopefully they'll be able to join us in the next few months. I know it's a lengthy process to go through to get to that point. Anything else we need to talk about? All right, so we'll all look for that doodle poll, those members of the work group, on when we'll be meeting next. And we'll plan tentatively on a March 7th meeting date. And I agree it would be great. It would be great to meet in person, so hopefully we can make that happen. Any final comments before we end this meeting? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I moved. I second.
Second.
All right.
Second. Thank you,
Sounds
Beth.
good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all you do.
Happy holidays.
Thank y'all.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.